Thank you so much, Ann, for joining us.
Thank you, Carrie. It's so nice to be back here at the Brain Injury Alliance of Arizona. I want to thank Carrie for inviting me to come back and for always providing cutting edge programs on brain injury awareness. I am having a little bit of technical difficulty pulling up my slides, which is why I only have 3 slides, because sometimes these things happen and I don't want you to be dependent on the slides. All right, so let me get started without my slides. Last time I spoke for Brain Injury Alliance of Arizona was on stage in 2016, and I gave a keynote, as Carrie mentioned, for the Rays of Hope conference. And in that talk, I focused on therapeutic humor and the impact laughter and humor have on brain health and learning. I also presented a workshop for the Brain Injury Alliance of Arizona that summer, and that was called Telling Your Brain Injury Story, which focused on how we define who we are and how we share our stories post-brain injury. And I'm hoping to pull in some elements from both of those talks, the healing impact of humor and reframing how we define ourselves in terms of our brain injuries from each of them. So actually, this is a good segue into what I wanted to talk about today. 2 of the things that I wanted to talk about today were flexibility and sense of humor. So, so I'm learning on the spot to be flexible. So I was mentioning that in 2016, when I spoke, I talked about the impact of humor on brain health and learning. And I also talked about how we define ourselves in terms of our brain injuries. And I'm hoping to pull in some of those elements again, as well as elements from my 2 TED Talks and other keynotes I've given and articles I've written since my 2011 brain injury. And so I'm calling today's talk, What a Brain Injury Taught Me About Navigating COVID Uncertainty. And one of the positive outcomes that I found in COVID has been that giving talks virtually has allowed us to reach more people, not just those who can make it to Arizona to attend it in person. So I'm really curious to know, where are you all listening from? Because I just popped on and I don't know where anybody's from. If you want to type in the chat where you're listening from, I'd love to know. Phoenix, we've got Phoenix, of course. Any other states or countries represented here?
Tucson, represent.
Tucson, nice. Tucson. Ooh, we've got Des Moines, Iowa, North Dakota, cool. Nice. 2 places I've never been to. New Jersey, oh, yay. I recognize the New Jersey name. Great. Okay, well, I'm coming to you from Maryland. I am in northern Maryland, just about 30 minutes north of Baltimore. And I'm just so grateful that we have this ability to reach so many more people. And this is one of the positive outcomes of COVID, I think. So I am not able to share my slides, so I'll just provide you with a few details on how I want to structure this talk before I get into my actual content. I'm not a fan of too many PowerPoint slides for this very reason, but also because I really want you to have more of an experience than reading slides. You know, have you ever been to one of those presentations where the presenter just reads off the slides? They call it death by PowerPoint. I really want you to just try to connect with what I'm saying and see how it fits for you. And I want it to be as interactive and experiential as possible. I am an adjunct professor of English, and when I teach college online, I like to keep it pretty lively by asking questions. I also think that as brain injury survivors, those of us who are survivors here, we sometimes have to be careful to avoid sensory overload and multitasking, and sometimes, you know, slides and other things can take away from what's actually being said. And I don't think I could be as present for you as a brain injury survivor, or you for me, if we were focused on other content that's not that's being presented on the screen. Plus, I'm not going to share that much new information with you. What I am going to focus on is what's already inside you. And I will share my experience with how navigating my TBI taught me about navigating COVID. And I will ask you to think about your own experiences in that context. And if you want to jot down notes, questions, insights, doodles, whatever, feel free, but it's not essential. You've got the answers inside you to the questions I'm going to ask already. I'm just going to pull them out of you. Recently, I earned my life coach certification, and as such, I'm looking to conduct this more like a coaching session mixed in with a little bit of writing teacher, but not the kind that grades you. And so when I'm coaching, it's my job to pull clients' strengths out of them and to help them plan a strategy for using those strengths to achieve whatever they want. And that's my objective for you today, to help identify the strengths that you discovered or nurtured as the result of your concussion or some other trauma if you've never suffered a concussion, and to create a plan moving forward to help you navigate life's uncertainties, particularly in these challenging times that we're experiencing now. But most of all, I want you to leave this session with more questions than you came in with. And I know that seems a little bit counterintuitive. You come to a talk to get answers and learn about stuff. But what I want for you is to learn to sit with the comfort of the discomfort of not knowing everything and learning how to use what you learn from those not so great experiences to build your resilience and your emotional intelligence for future challenges. And I believe that cultivating curiosity is essential for that, and it's really good for our brains. So I would really love it if you're constantly questioning. Increased curiosity is one of the things I identified as making me smarter after my TBI in 2011. And I talked about this in my first TED Talk. It's called How a Brain Injury Made Me Smarter. And that was on one of the slides that I was going to present, but I will send them along after this talk. Occasionally, I may invite you to type out short answers or yes or no to some of my questions in the chat box, just really short answers. You don't have to, but if you want to, I would love that. And as I said earlier, I will never call out on people to participate unless they want to. And while I hope you will participate actively, many people just prefer to just sort of hang back and observe, and that's cool too. I think our time together will still be valuable to you in whatever way you want to use it. So I plan to speak for about 45 minutes, and I will count on Kristen to hold me to that. I also set an alarm on my smartphone here to remind me. But yeah, Kristen, if you could just keep me honest about the 45 minutes, that would be great. And then at the end, I'll allow about 10 to 15 minutes, I'm guessing, for questions or other comments or insights that you may have had. And I would ask that if you have questions or comments to just jot them down and hold on to them until the end of the session. And if I don't get to all of them in the time that we have, I would invite you to email me. My email address was on one of those slides, but it's pretty easy. It's Ann, A-N-N, at annzuccardy.com. A-N-N-Z as in zebra, U-C-C-A-R-D-Y.com. Thank you, Kristen. And Brain Injury Alliance of Arizona knows that it's okay for them to give out my email address. So if you can't remember it, that's okay. They will give it to you. And last but not least, I'm on all the major social media platforms, and I'm pretty easy to find because my name is unusual. So there's only one Ann Zuccardy, and you can always reach out on social media if you'd like to. So it feels really weird for me to say Happy National Concussion Awareness Day. That just feels weird. And I don't know about you, but I don't associate my concussion with any kind of celebration. However, I do think this day is important for us on 3 levels. First of all, concussion in general does get a lot of press these days, But still, too many people believe that concussion is a mild injury. And many people don't even know that concussion is considered to be a traumatic brain injury. I think we all have a responsibility to educate people that a concussion is a TBI. And while it may have the word mild in front of it, it's lowercase m, capital TBI usually in the shorthand. Mild only usually refers to the impact, not necessarily the long-term effects. And my concussion was in 2011, 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years ago next month. And I still have effects. So it's hardly mild for me. And if you've struggled with any long-term effects, I'm sure your injury is not mild either. This is an important distinction that I did not know before my TBI. And number two, the second reason I think that National Concussion Awareness Day is important is because we concussion survivors often tend to be mostly pretty high functioning. And any long-term effects we may feel from our brain injuries are often invisible to people looking at us. You would never meet me on the street and think that I had a disability. Have any of you, after concussions with lingering long-term effects, had people tell you, oh, you look perfectly okay? Or, oh, there can't possibly be anything wrong with you. You look totally normal. I get that a lot. I've gotten, you earned a master's degree after your brain injury, so you must be okay now. Or, well, you seem so normal, when I tell them I still have aphasia. I often can't find the right word for what I'm trying to say. I still have depth perception challenges. I still have reading challenges. And I have terrible short-term memory a decade after my brain injury. And I don't know about you, but that kind of stuff always makes me, as a brain injury survivor, feel a little bit minimized. The third reason that it's important for us to have and to acknowledge National Concussion Awareness Day is because we need specialized support and awareness that a national day like this provides. I remember when I was first diagnosed with post-concussive syndrome and major depression after my concussion, I went to a local brain injury support group, but I felt like I didn't belong. A lot of the people that I met there were severely disabled, and I felt really guilty because I could still drive a car, I could still take care of myself, I could still feed myself, live independently, pretty much do almost everything I had always done prior to my injury. And so I didn't feel like I really belonged there. So I worked with my speech and language pathologist, and I formed a group for other people like me in 2014 through my hospital's outpatient rehab center in Vermont. We started that in 2014. It was for women with mild traumatic brain injury. We were all pretty high functioning. And today that group is still active and our membership grows every year. So clearly there was a need for specialized support for us. And so I'm really glad that we are making progress in understanding that people who appear not to be disabled on the outside, but have suffered a traumatic brain injury still need incredible support. We all have a TBI story if we've ever had a concussion. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about my brain injury story and how it changed my personal definition of intelligence as a result. I found that my story really challenged conventional ideas about what makes people smart. So here it is. So in 2011, I was in Germany with my husband, and he was on business, but we were also doing some leisure activities, having some fun in Germany. And on the last day of our visit, I believe it was a Friday night, I decided that I needed to take a shower because we were going to catch a plane the next day on Saturday to come back to the US. And so as I was stepping into the bathtub to take a shower, I had one foot in and one foot out, and the foot that was in the tub slipped, and I went forward head first into the wall inside the tub. And I didn't lose consciousness, but I was definitely shaken up and speechless for quite a few minutes after that. And interestingly, I hit my leg, the leg that was outside the tub, hit the side of the tub and was pretty badly bruised. And I thought that was my problem. I had no idea what had really happened to me. So I came home, flew home, and I was definitely, over the course of that weekend, it was a Saturday when we got home, over the course of that weekend, I felt increasingly weird. I don't even know how to describe weird. I was having some trouble forming words. I just felt kind of spacey, a little bit drunk or something. I couldn't quite pinpoint what was wrong. However, I was very anxious because I had to go back to my very important job on Monday, and I was feeling very anxious about that. So that Monday morning, I got up and I decided I had to go to work. I felt horrible. My head hurt, my leg hurt, and I wasn't functioning properly. But I decided that I had to go to work to answer my 5,000 emails that would inevitably be in my inbox. So I drove myself to work, and over the course of the day, things got worse and worse. I couldn't read. I couldn't read a simple email. I couldn't form a sentence. I couldn't answer a question when somebody asked me a simple question, and I was stumbling around like a drunkard. So I went home that night, and I thought, it'll pass. I gotta whack on the noggin, I'll be fine. Went home that night and went to bed and woke up in the middle of the night. Well, it was actually like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't want to wake my husband up, but I had the most intense headache I have ever felt in my entire life. I went into the bathroom and vomited, and I thought then and there that I was going to die. We went to the hospital emergency room where they did a CAT scan and diagnosed me with a coup contra coup head injury. So if you don't know what that is, a coup contra coup head injury is if you picture your brain like a bowl and it's filled with jello. So the skull, your skull is the bowl, your brain is the jello, right? So you take that bowl and you ram it into something, that jello is going to hit the point of impact, right? And then it's going to bounce back and hit opposite the point of impact. So a coup contra coup head injury means that your brain has been bruised or damaged in 2 areas, not just one. So that was what I was diagnosed with. And I was told brain rest. Now, I heard a little bit of the end of the last speaker, and I gathered perhaps that brain rest may not be what is prescribed anymore. I'm not sure how they are handling it now, but this was 10 years ago, and they prescribed brain rest. And so brain rest meant, for me, it meant no work, no reading, no TV, no driving, no nothing. It meant a lot of sleeping, basically, and eating. And so that was fine. A little bit of brain rest was fine. But when days became weeks, and then weeks became months, and nothing was getting better, I was like, I need some help here. I wasn't getting the help that I needed. And so I became very vocal, and I started a blog called I Want My Brain Back. which is now defunct, but that blog garnered a lot of traffic. And because I'm a writer, I knew how to engage people on the blog, and it got a lot of traffic, and that's what got me invited to do my first TEDx talk. So during this time when I'm doing this brain rest, this enforced nothingness, it was very difficult for me because I was always a person who defined my intelligence by how much I accomplished. And those measures of accomplishment for me as a student when I was younger were always getting good grades and scoring high on standardized tests. And as an adult, it became having a good job, earning money, doing what I went to college for, which was, I was an English major, and being paid to do what I was good at. And all of a sudden, I couldn't do what I was good at anymore. I couldn't read, I couldn't write. I used voice dictation software to write my blog. That was, thank goodness for technology. That was very helpful. But eventually, after being home on brain rest for quite a long time, I had to quit my job. I couldn't do it anymore. And I became very, very depressed. And as a side note, I just want to say that brain injury survivors have a much higher incidence of depression and suicidal ideation than non-brain injury people do. And I've read some studies that say up to 80% higher chance. The studies vary from study to study, but it's pretty high. So I realized that I wasn't depressed that I couldn't do my job anymore. I was depressed because I thought I wasn't very smart anymore. And I remember going to a neuropsych evaluation in which the tester told me that I was below average in short-term memory. And I burst into tears because I couldn't remember a simple string of words. I thought I was stupid. I thought I was hopeless. And that kind of self-talk is very dangerous. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that if any concussion survivor ever feels any of those feelings, that you please must reach out to a trusted friend, a mental health professional, a clergy person, whoever gives you support, because you are not alone. Your brain injury family understands all too well how that feels, and we understand invisible disabilities. So with the help of my therapist and doctor, support group, family, friends, some good meds, and my own resilience, I was able to eventually overcome those feelings. But it's a decade later. It's taken a lot of work. And what I learned was that I needed to change my personal definition of what made me smart. And so in my first TED Talk, I talked about that. And what I identified as the 3 things that made me smart after a brain injury, I call these things my new smart. There were 3 things. The first one I called creative adaptation. You may have heard the term compensatory strategies. I didn't know that term then, but that's basically what I was doing. So like I was creating compensatory strategies without even knowing it. So let me give you an example. So like, it was really hard for me visually to cross a street in traffic, but I'm very independent and I just wanted to be out in the world. So the first time I had to cross a busy street, I was terrified because doing that back and forth visual thing, tracking, it was unbearable. I couldn't do it. And so what I would do was I would find someone who looked responsible, usually a mother with a young child, and I would sort of follow them across the street. So they would lead me across the street, because who's safer than a mother with a young child to cross the street? So that was my compensatory strategy. I invented a new way to cross the street. That was my first thing. Second thing I identified as my new way to be smart was curiosity. So it's kind of like a child asking why? We've all experienced toddlers who just why, and it drives us crazy, but it's a beautiful quality to have as an adult. And the other thing about that curiosity is, think about a child learning how to walk, right? a toddler learning how to walk, or a 1-year-old or whatever. Some of them crawl. Some of them scoot while holding onto the couch or other furniture. Some of them just get right up and walk. Some of them fall on their butts and then get up and try it again. I mean, every child has a different way of doing it, right? They don't take a class, don't think about it, they just do it. So I thought about that a lot, and I tried to get more in touch with that childish part of me and not be so self-conscious about figuring out how to do things in new ways, and just like be willing to look like a child. The third thing I discovered that created my new sense of smart was my hunger for lifelong learning and personal introspection. What has this thing taught me about me? What has it taught me about my strengths? What strengths or superpowers have I identified that I can apply to the next challenge going forward? Because life's going to be full of challenges. So it's my last definition, that thing, that identifying my superpowers and applying them to the next challenge, that I really want to focus on today, because I think that's what's the most powerful thing for us as brain injury survivors to identify as we navigate this crazy COVID world. So I'm going to ask you in a minute to type into the chat, and I will give you an example, what your brain injury, or it can be another trauma if you've never had a brain injury, has shown you about your own personal strengths or superpowers. What have you discovered about yourself, or what superpower have you strengthened as a result of your trauma? And let me give you an example. Like for me, the big word that came up over and over was flexibility, right? Adapting, compensatory strategies. And the other thing that came up for me time and time again was humor. Being able to laugh at myself, being able to not take it so seriously, being able to be more childlike, that I would put that all under humor. So maybe yours are similar, maybe your superpowers are similar, maybe they're different. I don't know. That's okay. We're all different. But I am going to ask you to take a minute right now and think about 1 or 2 or 3 single word descriptions of your personal superpowers that you discovered through your brain injury or through some other trauma. And I'm going to ask you to start to enter some of those words into the chat, and I will be watching them. Go. Resilience. Yes, that's a good one, Janice. Anything else? Any others? Bravery. I love that one. Courage, bravery. Yes, indeed. Curiosity. Absolutely, Kim. Thank you. Anybody else? Patience. Oh, I love that one. Humor. Erin says humor. Kristen says patience. Lovely. Good. Absolutely. I really like patience. I hadn't thought about that one. Okay. Well, you can keep thinking about those. I'm going to go on because Kristen says I've been speaking 30 minutes already. My, how time flies. I'm going to ask you to just keep thinking about those words as we continue, because we're going to come back to them and do something with them in a little bit. So for me, my word flexibility meant that ability of being able to sit with discomfort in life without an agenda, right? Being comfortable with discomfort, if that makes any sense. Meditation helps with that a lot. If you've ever meditated, you know that sometimes it's hard and other times it's easy. Sometimes being alone with your own brain is really hard. So when you meditate, the idea is that you focus on your breath and being present in the now, and inevitably a random thought's going to enter your brain, and it's your job to observe it, but not judge it and then redirect, very gently and lovingly redirect your brain back to your breathing or whatever visual thing that you're focused on in your meditation. And I can't tell you how many times I've said I've failed meditation because I've gotten derailed by random thoughts that pop into my head. And I know a lot of you probably have had that experience too. I can go down a pretty deep rabbit hole sometimes with meditation and random anxious thoughts entering my head. So that's where flexibility comes in. I had to learn to be less judgy with myself about stuff like that, about doing things correctly. I know that my brain is going to wander because I'm human. That's what happens. And so how do I use what I know to not judge myself and become more compassionate to myself, right? That was a big lesson for me in my brain injury. You cannot always control your thoughts. You're human. It's a challenge for all of us. In my second TEDx talk, I called that the safe unsafe, that idea of learning to be comfortable with discomfort. And by safe unsafe, I mean calculated risks. You know, the safe is your comfort level. The unsafe is that calculated risk that puts you just a little bit outside your comfort level. And that's where learning happens. And that's where neuroplasticity happens. Now, neuroplasticity is your brain's ability throughout your lifetime to create new connections. And many of us with brain injuries have learned about neuroplasticity firsthand as we've relearned how to do things. But anything you can do to increase your neuroplasticity is going to contribute to your brain health as you recover from concussion or as you age. I'm 59 years old, and I am very interested in keeping my brain healthy as I age. And I want to, do whatever I can in my power to be sharp and healthy when I'm 80 or 90 or even 100. And science has shown us that learning new things in middle age or at any age really is excellent for brain health and for neuroplasticity. So have you ever worked out and felt sore the next day? I think many of us have had that experience when we've done something physically that's brand new that we're not used to. You're sore the next day. And that's because you're using new muscles and you're just not used to using them. It's kind of the same way with your brain. When you first start challenging yourself with calculated risks and finding comfort in the uncomfortable, it hurts a little. I mean, not physically, but it's a little uncomfortable and a little bit awkward. Remember, we talked about the child learning to walk, though. They don't judge that. They just do it. And as we age, I think we often lose touch with our inner child. Child doesn't care how they look when they're learning to walk. So why do we as adults care that we might look or feel silly or awkward doing a new thing? It's because we've been conditioned that learning is deadly serious. And again, science has shown us that that's not quite true. And take my word for it as a professor, when we are happy, laughing, having fun, the learning sticks better. So that's the value in humor for me. I like to say, embrace your inner awkward child, laugh with them, comfort them, be patient with them, make it fun for them, gamify everything. It makes life so much more enjoyable, and it's going to be good for your brain. So, continuing with my second superpower, humor, laughter also has many physical benefits. So when we laugh, we reduce cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and we can decrease our blood pressure. We can increase oxytocin, which is the hormone that's associated with empathy, love, trust. And laughter also increases oxygen in your lungs and your bloodstream. Here's an interesting fact that I learned in my brain injury recovery. Your body does not know the difference between manufactured and spontaneous laughter. So here's what I mean. By spontaneous laughter, I mean, you tell me a joke, right? And I think it's hilarious, and I immediately burst out laughing, right? Which I often do at pretty much any joke because I'm a child. Manufactured laughter, on the other hand, is when you force yourself to laugh. That's manufactured laughter, right? I saw a few smiles there. Like, that was kind of funny when I did that. Imagine doing that in a whole room full of people. Manufactured laughter is contagious. One person starts doing it, then the next person, and before you know it, everybody is really laughing for real. It's amazing and powerful. And so for that reason, I got involved in what's called laughter yoga. I will provide a link for that later on, but if you Google it, you can find it. You can find videos on YouTube. It's lovely. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I even have led laughter yoga in my father's nursing home when he was dying of dementia. The only requirement for laughter yoga is that you need to be able to laugh and breathe. Pretty much it. Laughter paves the way for health, growth, neuroplasticity, all of that stuff. So I want to go back to my two words, humor and flexibility. Yours may be different. How do they contribute to functioning in COVID uncertainty? How am I going to translate all this stuff to COVID? The answer is this. Those two things make me more resilient for me. Let me repeat that because it's really important. They made me more resilient for life's future challenges. And your brain injury superpowers can make you more resilient too. And does that mean that new challenges are easy or comfortable? Nope. Sorry. It simply means that you have more tools in your toolbox that can give you confidence when dealing with new challenges now, as a result of identifying what made you strong and recovering from your brain injury or whatever trauma you've had. This resilience means that I can embrace the comfort in discomfort more confidently, knowing that I will always prevail and find my way, because I know that I am good at flexibility and humor. So scientists have been trying to figure out what makes some people more resilient than others. Have you ever wondered, how do some people take really traumatic events and turn them into growth experiences while others really struggle with that? There's a term for that. It's called post-traumatic growth. We've all heard of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, but we very rarely hear about post-traumatic growth. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an expert on this topic. It's a term that was only identified in the 90s, but scientists love to study this stuff, and you can Google it if you want to learn more. But people who experience post-traumatic growth often find new appreciation for life, new spiritual direction, new possibilities, stronger relationships after their trauma. And it doesn't mean that they don't grieve their trauma. It just means that they're able to identify the growth opportunities and use them to grow beyond defining themselves by the trauma. It doesn't mean they never get sad. They sure get sad. Everybody gets sad. It simply means that they're able to find new meaning, empathy, and a sense of purpose in their challenges. And I know you wouldn't be here today if you also didn't believe that there's something good for you in the trauma of brain injury. So how do we apply this to navigating COVID? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a challenge. COVID sucks. And there's no pretty way to say it. I thought about this a lot, but it was like, yeah, it sucks. We've been living with these challenges for well over a year now, and oops, my timer just went off. Uh-oh. I'm going to keep going because I'm almost done. I don't know about you, but my 2020 was awful. I lost 5 close friends between the ages of 45 and 60. 3 were cancer deaths, 1 was a COVID death, and 1 was a vehicle accident. Additionally, I lost my dog at the end of the year. You can see See his picture behind me? He was 17 and we had to put him down, and honestly, I'm still grieving about it. However, I knew what to do with it. I wrote about it. And there's been a lot of research into therapeutic journaling. And because I'm an English teacher, I love this. But people who handwrite their thoughts only for their own eyes consistently are better able to recognize their own patterns, uncover their solutions, and process difficult feelings. And through my writing, I recognized many similarities between the brain injury recovery and COVID. And when you're, for example, when you're recovering from a brain injury, you don't know how long it's going to take. Sound familiar about COVID? You're forced to sit still and figure it out, wait it out. Sound like COVID? With TBI, you don't know what the future is going to look like. You may not be able to do some of the things you normally like to do. Sound like COVID? So as I reviewed my journal and my writings, I saw flexibility and humor over and over and over again. So I made sticky notes and I put them around as I was challenged with my grieving in the last year, and as I continue to be challenged with it. And I had an epiphany. If I could navigate 2020 and however long COVID lasts with these two superpowers at the helm, I would be okay. I'd be more than okay. I'd grow. I'd experience post-traumatic growth. Wow. I would continue to grow like I did after my brain injury. So I backwards engineered my process and created some steps for you to replicate it, which is on one of my slides, which I will send to see if it resonates with you. So the first thing, I'm going to invite you to go back to thinking about your 2 or 3 words, your beautiful superpower words that you came up with earlier. And I'm going to ask you to write them down in big, bold letters with a pen and paper, not with your computer, with pen and paper, because when we write by hand, it connects better in our brains. And I'm going to invite you to set the scene. You're going to journal for your eyes only with those 2 words in mind. And I want you to go back to your concussion days, your trauma, and use as many details as you can remember to write about what it was like in those early days. Evoke as many senses as you possibly can, the more the better, and create a scene like you're writing like a movie script. Where were you? Were there any sounds or sights you remember? Taste, describe them vividly. The more sensory input you can get, the more this is going to be effective. Then think about how the strengths that you identify for you, like for me, humor and flexibility, to overcome a particular challenge in recovery. And I want you to be as vivid as you can possibly be. Then you're going to take a break and read what you've written. And you're going to take some time to revel in your superpowers. How did it feel in your body when you overcame a challenge? And really close your eyes and get in touch with that. Like, try to feel it in your body. Try to feel flexibility. Try to feel fun in your body. It can do wonders for you when you do that and you try to apply it to today's challenges, because you know you have those superpowers in your back pocket or in your toolbox or whatever you want to call it. And this is not easy to do. Not easy by any stretch of the imagination. It's not easy at first, but remember what I said about neuroplasticity and finding the comfort and discomfort. It's going to feel weird at first, and it takes some practice. It's like meditation. Like, I don't think anybody ever gets it. You know, we're all just practicing all the time, but I promise if you practice this regularly, you'll eventually make a connection between the two or three superpowers that you identified in your previous challenges and apply them to your current challenges. And yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. There's no getting around that. So here are my simple words of wisdom. I like to say the unknown is always uncomfortable, but that is where the real learning happens. You all have superpowers. They're very different from mine. You have all navigated concussion or other trauma and now COVID, and you will continue to navigate through future challenges with these tools. So I would invite you to put on your superhero cape, educate others about concussion. Your journey has genius in it, and it's yours alone. Write about it, talk about it, get support, then get out there and share your unique, new, smart, Remember, I talked about that earlier with anyone who needs to hear a positive message about brain injury, COVID, or whatever challenge you are going through. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I apologize for running over, but I would be happy to take your questions now.